Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today I'm going to be painting Sunrise Garden Walkway, and I'm going to be sipping on some spiked seltzer. And if you enjoy this video, I do hope that you like and subscribe to my channel, and that you also check out my Patreon page where you're going to find additional painting perks. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so for my materials today, I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 inch canvas. If you're painting along with me, you can certainly switch up the size, but that's what I'll be using. For my materials today, I have acrylic paint. The colors are titanium white, deep yellow, burnt sienna, which I'll call rust, green oxide, fire red, fluorescent purple, burnt umber, which I'll call brown, and Mars black. And of course you can switch up those colors too if you'd like, but that's what I'll be using. For my tools, I have a 1/2 inch, let's see, let me put them in order here. There we go. A 1/2 inch wide flat bristle brush, a number 11 round synthetic brush, and a number 7 round synthetic brush. And I will refer to these as small, medium, and large as we go through the painting process. And of course you can switch up the size on those as well. And if you're painting along with me, you'll probably want a cup of water for washing your brushes, as well as a paper towel for drying your brushes. And down below this video, I will be providing you with a couple of additional resources that can help you through your painting process. One of them is a link where you can purchase the same exact paint kit that I'm using, from the large canvas to the fancy palette and all that good stuff. So that's down there for you. There's also a link where you can download a free image of the final painting, so you can print that and use it as visual reference as you go through the painting process. And there's also written step-by-step instructions down there for you as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so what we're going to do for the first step is we're putting our sky in place. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush. The colors that I'm using are white, yellow, green, and black. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to bring my sky down maybe about 1/5 of the way down my canvas. And I'm going to have my sun rising over in through here. So it'll be really light, then it's going to get more yellow along the edges, and then it's going to fade off into like some low-lying morning clouds over on the right-hand side. So you'll see how I'm going to do this. We're going to put our sun in place right now. Later we'll put our sun rays, so don't worry about trying to do that right now. So I'm going to start with white paint on my brush, and I'm going to decide kind of where that 1/5 of the way of my canvas is. So if this is about halfway and this is about 1/4 of the way up my canvas, it's a little bit less than that. So that's about where I'm going to start, and I'm going to put an area of white paint in through here that's almost to the top of my canvas and maybe about this wide. And then once I've got that area of white paint, then I'm not going to wash my brush. I'm just picking up a little bit of yellow paint on my brush, and I'm going to get these two areas to blend in together. So if I need more moisture, I'm going to pick up more white as opposed to yellow, but you can certainly get it as bright as you want. If you want your yellow to be very dominant, you can certainly add more. And then I just kind of go along the edges of where that white area was to get it to blend in. And then as I go towards the right side of my canvas, I'm picking up a little bit of yellow and white to get it to go a little bit darker as it goes over towards that right hand side. And I do not have a lot of paint on my brush right now. I'm using very little bit, so that way I can transition from one color to the next when I want to. As I go to the right, I'm going to keep these yellow and white colors up at the top. So I'm picking up again just a little bit of yellow and white. And then as I get towards the horizon line, I'm starting to pick up a tiny bit of green also, so I just picked up a little bit of green to get this to start to transition into a little bit darker of a color as it goes down towards that horizon. Now I'm going to pick up a touch of green and a teeny tiny bit of black. I'm going to show you how small of an amount I have, just a teeny tiny bit, and a little bit of white. So I have green, black, and white, all three colors on my brush at the same time. And this is going to create an out of focus kind of gray, greenish area off in the distance. So it could resemble to the viewer either out of focus like hills or mountains or a forest or low-lying morning clouds. So it can really end up resembling any of those things. It's just going to be out of focus. And because we added kind of a gray color to it, that's going to do what's called desaturate your colors. So it's going to make it look like it's off in the distance. And you can have this as light or as dark as you want. You can even go up at an angle to make it look like there's some clouds just drifting off into the atmosphere. And then we're going to utilize this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your clouds and your sky in place, you can wash and dry the large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting ourselves a path. So I'm going to use my large brush, and I'm going to be using brown and white. You might find that you want to use a little bit of black if you want yours more on the gray side, or you could use, you know, a little yellow if you wanted to, but I think I'm going to stick with some brown and white. How I'm going to do this is I'm going to guide you into making the outline of the path, and then we'll just color it in. So I'm going to put brown and white on my brush at the same time. I like to use multiple colors on my brush in this type of step because it's going to give me varying shades and tones of that one color as opposed to pre-mixing a tan color. This will give me something more natural and kind of organic looking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come on my horizon line. I'm going to come all the way over to the right hand side and then back myself in maybe about 3 inches, and then I'm just going to give myself a little bit of a mark that's probably about 1 inch wide. Doesn't have to be very wide at all. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down onto the bottom right hand side of my canvas. I'm going to come up maybe about 2 to 3 inches, make myself another mark. And then I'm going to put a third mark down in the bottom left hand corner of the canvas. So this represents the far end of the path, and then these are going to represent the 2 ends that are closest to us. So I want my path to look like it's really kind of snaky and going off into the distance, and it's going to be really large close to us and get super, super small as it goes towards the top. So I'm going to do my left side outline first. I'm going to be at the left side of this marker in through here. I'm going to, in essence, kind of come down and swing it around in through here, and then I'm going to swoop it way back down into here. So here we go. I'm going to come down just a little bit in through here, and then I'm just going to kind of scoop it or slope it or ride it along in through here. And I don't necessarily care if my line is perfect right now. This is just kind of giving myself an outline, so to speak, and I'm just going to kind of bring it down into this bottom left hand corner. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the right hand side, only I want my path to kind of look like it's getting larger as it comes down towards me. So I'm going to start really small up here, and I'm going to kind of follow the outline of here. And then right about in through here is when I start pulling my line a little bit farther away, and then I'm going to start to turn it in through here, and it's going to meet this marker over here. So here we go. I'm going to come down in through here. I'm going to ride this along up here. So this remains only about 1 inch or so wide. And then somewhere about here is where I'm going to start to bump it out a little bit further. And you can see it's getting wider and wider. And right about here is where I'm going to start to turn it in through here. I'm reloading my brush with brown and white, and I'm just going to bring it down in through here. Now I'm going to have to color in my path. So I'm going to be using brown and white on my brush at all times. I'm not terribly concerned about how perfect it is because it's going to be disguised with a whole bunch of flowers and shadows and all kinds of good stuff. But I'm going to try and get it a little bit lighter up in through here, up through the top of the path. I'm just using a left to right brush stroke, and I am going all the way to the edge of my path. So it looks like maybe it's gravel or something along that line. And I'm going to have it pretty light up in through here. And as soon as I start to kind of come around this corner where I feel this is going to be more in the shadows, I'm going to use more brown on my brush. So right now it's pretty darn light. I'm making it kind of a messy look. And now I'm going to start picking up more brown. And that's where you're going to see it's going to start to get a lot darker as I come down and towards this right hand side. And you might, again, want to use a little bit of black or, you know, whatever color kind of speaks to you, but I'm definitely going really, really dark down in this bottom right-hand corner. And I am using a good amount of paint because I know I'm probably not going to do too much to this path later. I'm just going to be putting maybe a couple of shadows and highlights in it, but I'm going for a pretty thick and textured kind of look right now. So I'm using a good amount of paint to make sure I've got some good coverage. I'm doing it pretty dark down in through here. I'm going to have a big flower pot over on this left hand side. So again, not terribly concerned if it is perfect. I might bring this out just a little bit more. And of course you can certainly play with the shape of your path however you feel it's going to look the best. And then we're going to use this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your path all nice and put into place, you can wash and dry this large brush. And you can see how I just kind of keep dabbing on the brown and the white just so I have a kind of a messy, almost gravel type look to it. And then, of course, I've got this right-hand side nice and dark. And again, you can certainly keep fiddling with yours as much as you'd like to, but I'm going to wash and dry my large brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are painting our grass. I'm going to be using my large bristle brush, and the colors that I'm using are brown, green, yellow, and white. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to be applying my paint with a dotting type technique with the end of my brush. So this way I have a really textured look throughout the grass, and I don't have to worry about going back and doing any additional layers. I should be able to get it on one shot. And I'm going to start at the bottom. And as I go towards the top of my canvas or towards the horizon line, I'm going to be making it lighter. So I'm going to start with dark paint down at the bottom, and as I go towards the top, I will be getting it lighter and lighter. The lightest area is going to be in through here where the sun is. So that's going to make it look like the sun is illuminating the meadow or whatever, the field or whatever you want to consider this to be. So I'm going to do this left-hand side first so you can kind of, well, maybe I'll do them both in conjunction with one another. I'm going to start with brown paint on my brush. I'm going to start down at the very bottom of my grassy type area, and I'm going to be bumping into my walkway because I want these areas to look like they belong together. So once I've got that on, I can come over to the right hand side and just start to get that brown on there as well. I'm going to now pick up, I'm not bringing that brown up very high, I'm going to pick up green and brown on my brush at the same time and get these two areas to overlap one another and kind of blend in with one another. I am using a good amount of paint on my brush, but I am also kind of concentrating on not over blending. If you sit here and you blend that same area and you dot it 1,000 times, it will turn into one color. So if you want there to be a look of multiple tones and multiple colors, then you just want to keep your brush moving away from that one area. So you're continually moving around the area as opposed to in one spot. So right now I'm just picking up green. So I went from brown to brown and green and now to green. And every time I transition into a lighter color, I'm going to be mindful about overlapping and making it blend with that previous section of color. So by the time I'm done doing this, I don't want it to end up looking like I have a brown section, I have a green and brown section, I have a green section. I really want them to all look like they intermingle together nice and naturally. And again, I'm bringing it right up to the edge of my walkway. And if you miss a couple of spots, it's okay. We've got plants and pots and flowers and all kinds of stuff and boots, all kinds of stuff that's going to kind of intermingle with that. So now that I've got this area pretty much covered, I'm not going to wash my brush. I'm picking up green and yellow. So now I have green and yellow on my brush, and you're going to start to see the sunshine start to appear in the grass. And I'm making sure that I am overlapping my previous section so these two end up looking like they belong together, and that it's just transitioning into a lighter color up top as opposed to those specific sections. And again, I am just doing this as if it's the morning sunshine is just kind of casting its glow upon this beautiful, you know, country field or meadow where somebody's about ready to, you know, maybe go and take care of their morning gardening duties. Again, I still just have green and yellow on my brush, and I'm just overlapping these sections, bringing it right to the edge of my pathway. And in a minute, I'm going to start just using yellow on my brush, making sure I have a good assortment in through here. So now I'm just picking up yellow. I have not washed my brush throughout this whole process because I want these colors to look like they, again, are just transitioning into one another. And I'm okay with this right side being a little bit darker than the left side because that left side is closer to my light source, which is the sun. So I'm totally okay with that. Just making sure I've got all these little areas in through here, making sure I've got some of this nice yellow represented over here before I start picking up white, which is going to be my next color that I'm going into. So right now I still have my dirty brush. I'm just picking up white to get this side over here to transition into my light sunshiny area up at the top. And as I work my way up towards that horizon line, I am going to be crossing over the horizon line with my grass or my flowers or whatever this natural kind of piece of nature represents to you. And I want it to kind of be a little on that messy side as it crosses over into that horizon line. So that way it's going to make it look nice and natural. Just making sure that this white is blending in nicely with this area, which it looks to be that way for me. Now I'm just going to kind of cross over in through here. And I want this area to just look pretty similar to this because they're almost a similar distance away from that sun. But again, while I have those remnants of the yellow on here, I'm just kind of working my way to make sure that it blends in pretty well. And I continue to just pick up white paint. So what's going to happen is that yellow and any remnants of the other colors I was using, they will naturally work themselves off of my brush. Like I still have a little bit of green in the bed of my bristles, so if I was to just kind of push my brush like that, I could have a little section of green in through here. So if you've got a lot of paint within your bristles that you want to use, you can certainly just kind of push the side of it, or just use the tip of your brush, and that will avoid any kind of unwanted release of those other colors if you don't want them. And then again, as I work my way towards that sun, I'm picking up more and more white. So it's going to get brighter and brighter as it comes towards the sun. You might even have an area right near that sun that you can't detect the difference between the sun and the land. And if that happens, that's super cool. That's okay. That just means that that sun is really illuminating the grass that's in front of it. So if that happens to you, just roll with it, let it happen. And then I'm just going to kind of make sure that all of this talks to each other really well, and that this grass, this vibrant sunlit grass is all nice and blended and making it look like it's got beautiful highlights all throughout it. And then I'm going to be switching to my medium brush for the next step. So once I've got all of my grass nice and highlighted and assembled here, I will be washing, well, I'll put my large brush away, but I will take out my medium brush in preparation for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting the base coat for our boots. I'm going to be using my medium brush, and I'm going to be using yellow and white paint. And I do want to forewarn you that before you start this step, you do want to have your canvas dry. So, you know, you can take that extra long break if you'd like to, or you could blow on it or use any kind of fanning method that you'd like to get it dry. Or you could do as I did and just whip out a blow dryer and get it dry that way. Maybe yours is already dry by now, but if it's not, I definitely recommend drying it in some fashion. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the base coat for our boots with a light yellow color. So I'm going to take some of my white and I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to it. I'm really just looking for this to be like a primer coat for my boots. So I don't need it to be really, really bright yellow at this point. I'm really just looking to provide myself with a good shape for the boots, as well as some nice coverage on that background grass. I do like to paint objects over objects. As you'll probably notice in a lot of my videos, I do something similar to this, and then we draw an object on top of it. And the reason that I do that is because I don't like the time that it takes to paint around objects, and I don't ever get them as uniform as I want. So for me, an easier technique is to just paint all of the grass and then paint whatever objects are going to be landing on top of it. That way I'm not trying to paint around my boots in a gradient of grass. So that's just my thought process as I go through this. So as we paint these boots, I want to have a nice good coverage on them. We are going to be painting multiple layers with different techniques, but this base coat will be a nice primer coat. I'm going to use a light color with a lot of opacity, which is the white that we have in it. So how I'm going to start this is I'm going to guide you through creating a rectangle, and then we're going to make the shape of the boots after that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 4 dots to make. So if we come up from the bottom of our canvas, maybe about 2.5 inches, and then in from the right hand side, and about 2.5, 3 inches, make yourself a dot. Your path might look a little bit different than mine. So if you want your boots to be larger or smaller than mine, you can certainly make them accordingly, but you could use this same basic shape technique that I'm using to put them into, to get them into a shape, whether they're larger or smaller than mine. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself another dot at about the same height. I'm coming over into this vicinity. So if this is about halfway into my canvas, I'm a little to the right of that at the same height as this one. And then I'm going to go directly up from this marker, and I am going to be a little bit below my path. So I want the top of my boots to be lower than my path so we can still see the whole path. And I'm going to make myself a marker there. And then I'm going to stay at that same height and come over to the same distance as this one is. And if you wanted to, you could certainly use your brush as a measuring tool and say, okay, I came over this far down here or something like that, and then I want to go about the same distance up here. And you could do that with both sets of dots. And then we're just going to color those in. So you can kind of connect the dots, something like this, and don't worry about this being a perfect rectangle at this point. This is really just getting the shape started for us. And then I'm just going to kind of color it in with my light yellow color. And if you didn't mix enough, or if you need to mix more and you mix a color that's not exactly like the first tone that you did, that's quite all right too. Just remember that this is going to just be our base coat. It doesn't even have to be a perfectly executed coat of paint. We're just doing something that's going to give us a good stable primer base for these boots. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the tops of the boots. So what we just did was kind of gave ourselves the midsection of both of these boots. I'm going to do the little edge of the boots. So I'm going to go about halfway into my rectangle, and I'm going to do a little bit of a vertical line in through here, and then I'm just going to kind of curve it and meet this back corner here and color that in. And then I'm going to do the same thing over on this left hand side, but I think I want this to maybe kick out just a little bit further. So I'm going to go maybe about the same height, maybe a little bit higher, and maybe a little bit out from this corner like this. Get this to blend in with that, and then I'll get this to come over and just meet this little corner in through here, and then just color that in. So we've got the makings of the tops of the boots. Now I've got to give them the toe part of sorts. So what I'm going to do is I am going to come in from this bottom right hand corner, maybe about a half of an inch to a quarter of an inch to a half of an inch. This is going to be the toe of the right boot in through here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it in a curved line like this, and then it's going to meet this back corner in through there. So something like that, and then just color this in like this. And don't worry, we'll give it much more detail in a little bit. We're just getting our shapes on here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come about, I would say, almost halfway up this boot. That's where the top of this left boot is going to start kicking out, and we're gonna kind of round it around here and bring it back. So this is kind of like a little bit of a floating type of area for us. I would say if we come out from this left hand corner, I would say maybe about 2 or 3 inches and then up a little bit. This will give us kind of the front corner of that boot. And then I'm going to bring this back in through this area and give myself a little bit of a curve to meet this front part of the boot. And maybe your boots are bigger than mine or smaller than mine. It's going to be all your own personal preference. And then what I'm going to do is I've got to make the top part of the front part of this boot. So I'm just going to kind of do something like this and curve it back in through here. And then I'll start curving it up, and I'm going to meet it about halfway up that boot is where you'll see it's kind of gradually coming down. And of course you can certainly adjust yours accordingly. And then I'm just going to color this in with my light color. And then we are going to be using this same brush for the next step. So you can go ahead and make any adjustments that you need. I might bump this little toe out a little bit more, but you can certainly work on yours or make any little adjustments. And then you can wash and dry this medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're doing the base coat for our plant pots. I'm going to be using my medium brush, and I'm going to be using rust paint. So I like to have a lot of perspective in my paintings. So I'm going to have a couple of really big ones down in the bottom left and the right, and then I'm going to have smaller ones that are just going to be kind of lining the sides of my path. I'm going to bring mine just about maybe halfway up my path, but you could certainly, I'm going to have flowers up the rest, but I'm just going to have the pots in the first part of the path. So I'm going to do my anchoring ones or my big ones over on the sides first. I'm using rust paint, and again, just kind of think of this as like the primer coat. It's not going to look awesome after you get done this step, but it'll give us a good base for the rest of the pots, or for the rest of the details on the pots. So I'm going to have this one on the right hand side. It's going to come up about halfway on this boot here. So over to the right, somewhere in through here. I'm just going to bring it over till it's maybe, I don't know, maybe a half of an inch to an inch away from that boot. And then I'm just going to give it a little bit of a curved edge like this and bring it down towards the bottom of the canvas. And then I'm just painting it in with the rust paint. There's no fancy brush strokes at this point. I'm just giving it a good shape. And then later we will be adding the contour highlights and shadows onto it. But this again is just going to give us somewhere to start. And we'll be able to put our plants in the top and stuff after that. So on the left hand side, I'm going to have one, I would say, coming It's going to be a little bit further on down the path, and it might be a different size than that one. So I would say if you come maybe about halfway up this boot and just come to the left, or maybe almost to the top of it, somewhere in through here is where I have this one. I'm just going to give it a flat top because it's going to be covered with flowers at the top anyway, so I'm not terribly concerned about the exact shape of the top edge of it. And then I'm just bringing mine down somewhere in through here. And maybe you want your pots a little bit different shaped than mine. Whatever you'd like is totally fine by me. And then I'm just going to kind of color this in with my rust paint or my burnt sienna paint. And then I'm going to go ahead and put some along the edges of my walkway. So it's easier for me to kind of do the bigger ones first and work my way towards the small ones. And again, I'm not really doing much of anything on this step, just kind of giving myself a place where I want these pots to be. And I want them to be larger where they're closer to the boot and they get smaller and smaller as they go away from the boot. So I'm going to have my first one is going to be somewhere in through here, and it's going to kind of be tucked behind my boot. Maybe I'll bring it a little bit closer so I don't have to worry about that edge of the pathway. So I'm going to have this one in through here, and this one's going to be pretty big. It's actually going to go on the other side of the toe. So I'm going to bring this one out just a little bit on here. This one's going to be a really big one in through here, and then just kind of close it off and paint it in. Again, I'm not doing anything fancy. If you bump into your boot along the way, that's quite all right. And just bringing that edge up. And then I'm going to go ahead and make some smaller ones along the way. But I know that the tops are going to be covered by plants, so I am not going to be terribly concerned about the tops. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw myself a line for these tops that's going to go somewhere in through here like this. I want my plant pots to come about up this high. Once I get to the road where at the height that I want, I'm going to just bring that out a little bit to the left. And this is going to be the edges of my pots. So I can just take this. I got to stick my head out a little bit. Bear with me as my head goes back for a minute. It's tough to see things when I'm really super close to them. So I know that I want my farthest one to maybe come out to here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of stair step it at the bottom like this. So I can kind of do something like this, and you might have more than mine or less than mine. I'm gonna make them a little bit smaller as they kind of come over in through here, and this is actually going to be the last one over here, and something like that. And now I can just kind of color them in like this because I know they're in essence kind of sitting in front of one another, and it's the front one, and then they all just kind of sit behind each other. When we put the highlights and the shadows, you'll be able to see the difference between them all, but this kind of just gives you that illusion that they're getting smaller as they go along the way. I'm going to do the same thing on this one. My top one, I'm going to have just a little bit taller than this one, and these are almost going to look a little bit smaller, so I'm going to have this one coming somewhere in through here. Again, the tops aren't going to matter because I am going to be hiding them with plants, so I'm just going to give myself an arcing kind of line that follows the edge of my path, only it's going to get wider as it comes towards this edge in through here, and it's going to actually come up in through there. And then along the edge of my path, again, I'm just going to do a stair stepper kind of line. I want it to be bigger down in through here, so I can just, again, this is probably going to be hidden with the flowers from this pot, but these other ones, I'm just kind of making these little almost just little steps as I'm going away like this. And I might be doing more than I need to, but when we paint the pots in, you can certainly, maybe I think I'm going to make these a little bit bigger just because they're almost too small for my liking. So I'm kind of doubling mine up right now. There we go. That's going to make more sense for me. Excellent. So you saw how I did that. I just kind of made them a little bit bigger as they got closer, and then I'm just going to paint this in with my rust color. So we are going to be utilizing this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your base coat for your pots, you can wash and dry the medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're finishing our pots with our highlights and our shadows, and we're going to be using our medium brush to do that. So the colors that I'm using are black, rust, yellow, and white. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to put my shadows in place first, and this is just on the pots. We'll put any shadows on the ground that we need later, but this will just be the shadows on the pots. My light source is coming from the sun, so all of my shadows are going to be on the opposite side of that for each particular pot. So I'm going to start, oh, just a little FYI, make sure that you have these pots dried before you start this step. It'll be a lot easier for you. So I'm going to start with my shadows. I'm going to start with a tiny bit of black paint. Black can really take over easily, so just err on the side of caution when you're using black. I know that this particular pot, I'm not seeing the whole pot because the whole pot's probably somewhere over here. So I'm just going to put a little bit of a shadow down at the bottom right-hand corner of that. I'm going to wipe my brush off on my paper towel, and I'm picking up some of the rust color to get that shadowy area to blend in. And I know this pot might be shadowed a little bit by the boots as well. But once I've got that shadow on there, I just make sure that it's blended with the rest of the pot, and we'll add the highlight in a minute after we get all of it. I'm going to do all of my shadows first, make sure that they're blended in with the rest of the pot, and then we'll come back and do the highlight in a minute. So that's the shadow on that one. And then I'm just going to go kind of along these ones, probably in a quicker fashion because they're much smaller. So I have black on my brush, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of outline that right-hand side of where I feel that the shadow would be on that particular bucket or pot, something like this. And then I'm just getting these little narrow lines as I'm going around this corner. I'm now picking up some rust paint to make sure that this shadow blends in with the rest of the pot. And I'm going to make sure that I have enough paint on my brush, but not too much. So as you get into this area, and especially if you're working near this boot, if you bump into the boot, don't be terribly concerned about it because we're not done the boot yet. You can always make any little corrections. I keep wiping my brush off on my paper towel and picking up a little bit of that rust paint just to make sure that this shadow is blended in with the rest of that particular pot. So now I'm going to go ahead and make sure that this shadow is in through here. And again, the tops of these pots are going to be covered by flowers, so don't worry too much about the tops of the pots. I think I need a little bit more shadow in through here, and you can pull that shadow down the bottom of the pot if you want to, and just kind of keep working this until I feel that I have them blended with the middle part of the pot as well as the shadowed part. And we'll add a little bit of a highlight in a minute. Let me just make sure that I've got them on here. I'm going to go ahead and do my shadows on these ones on the left-hand side. So again, I'm going to start with that black on my brush, get a little bit on this left-hand side of this particular pot, wipe my brush off on my paper towel, pick up some of that rust color just to make sure that I've got it blended in well enough. And I just keep picking up that rust until I've got a good coat on here. Again, we're going to add the highlight in a minute. This just gets that shadow on there and gets the paint blended. Again, this is going to be, a lot of this is going to be hidden by plants, but I do want to, if there is any spot that's going to be showing, I want to make sure that I've got my highlights and my shadows in there, picking up some of my rust color. These ones are a little bit, I think I feel like I don't want to go too far with that shadow like I did on the other ones, so I just picked up that rust paint to make sure that this shadow blends before I go on to the other ones. And again, not terribly concerned about the tops of the pots because of the plant that's going to be adorning the top of it. So I'm just getting the shadow in between those little, the little sides of it, so I can make sure that they have some good dimension to them. Just picking up a little bit of the rust to make sure that that shadow blends in. And then I'm going to add my highlight. So my highlight is going to be with the yellow and white. So you could, in essence, use some of your boot color if you wanted to. I'm washing and drying my brush, but I like, again, to have, I don't know, a variety of tones in there. So I'm going to pick up yellow and white at the same time, and I'm going to add the highlight to it. So for me, this is going to have a pretty big highlight over here on the left-hand side. So I know that that's where my sun is coming from. So once I've got it on there, especially on this big one, what I'm going to do is I'm wiping my brush off on my paper towel and picking up some of that rust color and getting it to blend in a little bit. The highlight on the edge of it, depending on where it is, depending on where the bucket or the pot is, might be really vibrant, or it might just be a sliver. So it depends on how much of that that pot is actually catching the bit of sun. So I'm assuming that this is catching maybe a little bit of it in front of the boot. But you could certainly, depending on where you've placed your pot, maybe yours ends up in a little bit different of a spot. So you can have fun with guiding that the viewer to believe that the pot is in a particular place just by where that highlight is kind of hitting it. I know that, of course, these ones at the front are going to be brighter, so that's where I'm going to start with my highlight on these ones. So I have yellow and white on my brush right now, and I'm going to just kind of get the edge of these to just pop out. And again, I'm more concerned about the bottom portion of the pot as opposed to the top portion of the pot, because the top portion is going to be hidden with a whole bunch of beautiful flowers, so I'm not terribly concerned about that. I'm picking up some rust paint now. I do have this big one to go, but I just want to get these before they dry too much. Blending is usually a much easier task if the paint is still wet. So if you ever have difficulty blending your paint, just know that it's much easier if you can have that paint a little bit on the more moist side. So if you can blend it before it dries with the neighboring colors, that's going to give you a little bit easier mark of success. So I'm going to go ahead and add my highlight over here on this one, just making sure that they kind of make sense with one another. So I add my highlight, and now I get it to blend in with that rust color. And again, maybe your pots are much bigger than mine, or maybe they're catching the light in a different way than mine are. So I'm just giving it the idea that they're catching something from over there and that the darkness is coming over on the right hand side. And then I'm going to go ahead and repeat that step on the left hand side of these pots, or on the left on the pots on the left side of my canvas. I'm going to start at the one that's the closest to the sunshine, so something like this. And I'm putting my highlight on the right side of each pot, which of course is going to be on the opposing side of where the shadow was for each pot. So I'm just going to go do that, wipe my brush off on my paper towel, pick up a little bit of rust to get it to blend in. And then I will do the big one that's sitting at the bottom corner of my canvas. And again, not terribly concerned about the tops of those pots, but just making sure that I've got enough covered in through there. So again, just yellow and white is going to take this edge in through here. So yellow and white. Make sure I got a good amount there. Wipe my brush off on my paper towel, pick up some of my rust, and get it to blend in. And then let's see, we are going to be using this same brush for the next step. So once you've got all of your beautiful highlights and shadows on your pots, again, fiddle with it all you want to, but once you've got them to your visual preference, you can wash and dry this medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what I'm gonna do for the next step is I am doing my stems and leaves and greenery of sorts for all of my flowers. So this is going to be for all the flowers that are in the pots, and then I also have some flowers just lining the edge of my pathway in a non-systematic way. So I'm going to be kind of messy with how I put the placement on here. And then I have them all the way up here. I even have a little bit of an archway, but I'm not going to make that greenery very dark. I just kind of want it to be in place so I know where I'm going to be headed. So I'm going to be using green and black on my medium brush, and I'm going to be alternating picking up those colors. So one time I'm going to pick up green, the next time I'm going to pick up black, then green, then black. And what'll end up happening is, again, I'm going to have an assortment of light areas and dark areas, or light relatively speaking, that will give me some great dimension behind the flowers that we're going to be putting later. So I'm going to start with some green paint on my brush, and I know that I'm going to have some really large ones in these front pots, so I'm going to kind of tackle those first. And I am making some identifiable flowers. We're going to be doing daisies and roses and lavenders, but as far as the leaves and the greenery that are surrounding them, I'm making that up on the fly. I'm not, they're just going to be representational. I'm not going to go for the exact ones that a rose has or the exact ones that daisy has. I'm just going to go for some green area around it. So I've got green on my brush right now, and I'm going to add a whole bunch of little pieces coming down this bucket. I'm picking up black now, and that's how I'm going to do it. I am going to be alternating green and black paint on my brush. If you want this to be to take up more of your pathway, which I want mine to take up more of my pathway, I'm going to bring out this greenery even further. So I also want to kind of not build this particular one too high, because I want to give the visual of being able to see these ones behind it. So I am just gonna put a few, or keep it kind of lower, and then as I do these back ones, they can take on their own height, but this won't block the view of those. So I do want some really tall ones over on this left-hand side that are going to be from these pots over here. So I'm bringing this up pretty darn high. I just picked up some black paint, and now I'm just going to kind of all along the edge of this area where these pots are is where I'm going to have these little pieces of greenery just kind of coming out the bottoms, or the bottom of the flowers, but the top of the pot. They're leaning over the edges of them. They are going to be getting smaller and smaller as I go farther away. So as I'm doing this, I'm really in my head thinking wild grass. So I'm doing, some of them are going to be skinnier than others. Some of them are going to be leaning over. Maybe every now and again I do some polka dotted type motions to make it look like there's maybe some rounder leaves. So feel free to almost do any, this is a great time to kind of experiment with different types of brush strokes to get little different effects. But again, I want my flowers and stuff to get smaller and smaller as they're coming down towards the tail end of this little area for the planters. So they're now going to start jumping into the ground, so to speak, in through here. So really, this is my wiggle it just a little bit brush stroke. Wiggle it just a little bit. I want to see you wiggle it. So I just have the tip of my brush right now, and I'm really just kind of making these little areas along the edge of the walkway that are going to be great places for me to put some sporadic flowers throughout that particular area. So this darkness is really just acting as like background noise for where those vibrant flowers are going to go, and it's going to give it some good dimension when we get there. So again, I'm just kind of adding these little sections as I go up the pathway, and I'm really just tiny dotting these little tiny marks up and through here. I'm going to go ahead and make myself a bit of an area where I want that the archway to go off in the distance. So I'm just going to do a teeny tiny bit over and through here, very little, just something to give my mind the knowledge of where I'm going to want that to be later. And if I have little pieces that are sticking out here and there, it'll just authenticate it. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the same thing over here on the right side. So I'm just going to start down at the biggest one. I'm having this one huge. So I'm going to have some really tall ones coming out the top. I want this to look like, or to look and feel like it's really close to us. So I've got these really big pieces coming out. You might find when you get to the flower portion of it, adding your flowers on top, that you might even want one or two of your flowers to lean over in front of your boot. So that's going to be fun too. But right now I'm just kind of making sure that I've got some good leaves behind it that are going to accentuate those flowers when I do put them on later. So feel free to have fun with that. I've got some coming out all over the place. You can put them in different directions. And then I'm going to go ahead and do this area in through here. So these ones, again, I want it to look like it's getting smaller. So these ones are going to come up maybe about another quarter of the way up this boot. Maybe these ones are going to hide behind that edge of the boot a little bit. And then I'm going to have some of them hanging over and through here. So again, just really have fun with the way that your brush is moving. Just let it happen. I'm not really pressing or holding my brush really tight like a pencil. I'm kind of just letting my wrist and my fingertips just kind of guide and move that brush. If you come to a point where you're not seeing green anymore, it's just everything is black, that means your brush is overloaded. Wash and dry it. I'm washing and drying mine right now because as I was getting in through here, I was picking up green, but I'm not seeing much of it. So I do want there to be some evident green in there. So if that happens to you, just wash and dry your brush. It just means that you're overloaded with black. And then pick up a little bit more green next time. And then that way that's going to allow you to see the different colors. And I do want some of these flowers in this corner to be kind of leaning over my path and giving my path a lot of interest and excitement. So I'm making a couple of these ones even more lively and having a lot of energy to them. And then I'm going to do the same thing with going up the edge of this back edge of the path. And because we're on this side of the path, the tops of them are going to go into the pathway. So just know that that would be the natural direction of it. They all go up. So it's going to go up in front of that pathway. And then again, I'm just going to kind of wiggle my brush down towards here, which is just going to give me the illusion that there's still some greenery and stuff over there. And then we are going to be using, we're going to use this, let's use our small brush for the next step. So once you've got all of your greenery on here, you can put the medium brush away in your, wherever you'd like to. Take out your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what I'm going to do for the next step is I am going to be adding the soles on the bottom of the boots. I'm going to use my small brush and I'm going to be using black paint. You could certainly do yours with brown or gray or purple or whatever color you'd like. I'm just going to use black paint for my color of choice. So I'm going to use my small brush. I'm picking up a little bit of black paint. I'm going to do this left one first. And we already have a marker as to where the left boot meets the right boot. So I'm just going to kind of scoop my brush in that area a little bit and then just bring it down. I'm just doing maybe about 1/2 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch thick of the sole of my boot. And as I come up towards the front of the boot, I'm going to have a little extra part that's going to be kicking up in the front toe type area of the boot. So somewhere around here, I'm going to bring myself down this little area like this. And I'm just painting it in black. We can add little bits of highlights and stuff when we are painting the rest of the boot, but right now I'm just kind of getting it in place with some black paint on my brush. And if it does not cover 100%, you can either use a little bit of water on your brush, do a second coat, or just let it look uneven at this point, because again, we're going to be doing all kinds of other little tweaks and stuff to it to make it look nice and finished. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the one on the right side. So this piece that's here, I'm going to have that piece turned a little bit more towards the viewer or towards the camera. So, oops, I have a little green on my brush. I don't know how that happened. So I just wiped my brush, picked up some black. So I'm going to start this. If it makes your brain go easier, what you can certainly start by doing is just doing the bottom, just even kind of thin layer of the sole just towards the bottom edge of the boot itself. So you can certainly start there. And then what I'll do is I'll poke up this part somewhere around this area in through here. So it almost looks like the boot is looking straight at the camera or a little bit more towards the camera. And I want it pretty darn wide. So I'm going to have mine something like this and then something like this. And then I'm just going to color that part in with black paint. And you could also, if you wanted to, if you wanted this black decorative kind of sole to scoot up the back of the boot a little bit, you could certainly do that as well on this right side. And then we are going to be utilizing, we're going to actually, I think we're going to use the same small brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can wash and dry this small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we are finishing our boots. I'm going to be using my small brush. You could certainly use your medium brush if you'd like to. The colors that I'm going to be using are brown, yellow, and white predominantly. But I might find myself using a little bit of black if I want my shadow to go a little bit darker. So if that happens, I will definitely let you know. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to start with yellow and brown on my brush to separate the two boots and to start the shadow area of them. So I clearly know that this right boot starts, or it gets separated right here from the left boot, as well as right here from the left boot. So now all I need to do is draw myself a line that's going to represent the inside or the interior separation of the two. So this area is pretty easy. The shadow or the darker part is going to be on this boot, not on this boot. So I have my yellow and my brown on my brush, and I'm going to make my line to the left of this corner. So it's going to be, my dark paint is going to be on this left boot. And then I'm going to bring this line down, and I'm kind of just watching what I did over here. And at some point I have to look at the bottom here so I can understand what I'm going to do with that toe part. So whenever you feel comfortable to start transitioning into the rounded ankle part, you can go ahead and do so. But just know it's not going to be as long as this one, because this one is facing that way, whereas this one is facing us as the viewer. So somewhere, wherever you have this dip, that's about where you're going to want to put the dip on here. And then you're going to bring this out, and you're going to meet this little corner in through here. So I'm going to work on this left boot first, because that's where I have the paint, and that's what's on my brush right now is the yellow and brown. This is going to represent the shadowed side of this left hand boot, and this shadow goes all the way into this little crevice in through here. And you'll find that you might want to use a lot of paint or a little bit of paint. I'm using a small brush, so I can get away with kind of using a lot of paint. But if you were using a bigger brush, you might not, you might want to use less paint. Less paint will definitely give you more control. I'm putting a shadow down in through here, and now I'm going to start picking up my yellow paint. I didn't wash my brush. I'm going to get this yellow paint to just kind of blend in with that shadowy area, and I still have brown on my brush, so you'll detect it continuing to come off onto the boot itself. And I'm just working my way towards the left, which is going to be the lighter side, when I get to the top of this boot in through here, the top of the toe portion, I'm going to have it a little bit lighter on the top in a minute, but right now I'm just kind of getting this yellow on here. I will add an additional highlight to it in a minute, but right now just kind of getting the yellow on there. And right now, as the brown is almost fully worked its way off of my brush, I'm going to start picking up yellow with white also. So yellow and white on my brush right now. And this is going to work on the highlighted side of the boot. And if your boot grows like mine just did, just roll with it. I just bumped my brush out a little bit further than my outline, which is totally fine. And then I'm going to get this light section to blend in with that middle section that I just did. So this left section, or the left side of the boot, is being illuminated by my sun. So that makes the most sense. I'm going to just make sure I've got a nice highlight up here on the tippy top. I might come back and elevate this even brighter in a minute, but right now I'm just kind of getting it to blend in. And then I need to do something with the toe portion of the boot. So I know that I want it to look like it's sticking out a little bit further. So I'm going to get this top portion to be a little bit lighter than the than this area in through here. So it just kind of looks like it's sticking out a bit more. So you can play with the yellow and the white in conjunction with one another to get those sections to be blended, but yet have a little bit of dimension with that touch of a lighter area on that flat spot on the top of the boot, on the top of the toe portion of the boot. And then, you know, maybe it gets a little bit darker in through here and then brightens back up as it goes up the boot. And then I would just kind of keep playing with the colors a little bit and continue to adjust them until I feel that I've got enough of a highlight where I want it to be. And of course, wherever I feel that it would be catching the most sunlight, I'm going to go ahead and move over to this right boot. So I'm washing and drying my brush, and I'm going to start back with that brown and yellow on my brush at the same time. And this time I've got a shadow over on the right and down in through here. My boot toe is looking more at the camera in through here, so I'm going to have more of a toe or that highlight part is going to be in through here. And I'm also going to have a shadow of sorts in that ankle portion, which is being cast by the other boot. So I'm going to have a little bit of a shadow in through here. It'll be really light up and through here where it catches the tip of the sunshine. It'll be light at the tip of the toe, but I'll have a little bit of a shadow in through here and over on the right hand side. So I have brown and yellow on my brush to start to get this shadow over here on the right hand side. And you'll see as I add the highlighted portion of the boot, the toe and the side of the boot will take a little bit more form. Typically when you're adding these shadows and highlights on things of this nature, clothing or boots or anything of this nature, you're not only just doing it from doing the highlights and the shadows that are telling the viewer where the light source is, but you're also telling the viewer where the contours of those particular things are, which give that item shape or form. So I'm putting a little bit of a shadow in through here as well, and this is going to be over in through that toe, that I'm going to have my toe somewhere in through here. I might add a little bit of blackness in through the body or between the two, because my highlight might not jump out enough for me. I just added some yellow to my brush to get my shadow to blend in with the rest of the boot itself. So I did my shadow with brown and yellow, and now I'm just adding some yellow to the equation to get the shadow and the main area of the boot to start talking to each other. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing over on this side. And again, if your colors aren't blending well enough together, or they're not talking well enough together, you might just need a little bit more paint and a little bit more finessing with your blending. So now that I've got that on there, I need this to blend a little bit more for me. I'm not quite so happy with that, so I'm picking up a little bit more brown and yellow just to get these two sections to blend a little bit more for me. And then what I'm going to do, I'm picking up yellow and white to start transitioning into my highlighted area, which I know is going to definitely be at this tippy top left portion of this boot. And then I'll do the highlight on the toe. And then if I have any adjustments in my shadows, which I think I'm going to, the little shadow between the two boots, I think I want to elevate that just a little bit more so. And you can see as I'm adding this highlight to it, it really starts to take on a nice shape on that top edge of the boot. So I think this highlight is again going to be catching the sun right about, I would say right about here. Yeah, that looks good. And then I'm going to just kind of blend it in with the rest of the front of the boot, something like this. And of course yours might be a little bit more lighter than mine or darker than mine. It all ends up working out. And if you can get it to be a little bit lighter on the entire left hand side and then just kind of fade off into this fade into the darkness of the boot, you can certainly have that happen as well. And then of course I need to finish that area in through there. And then I think I am going to put just a tiny bit of a little bit darker with black and brown on my brush, maybe a touch of water, just to get this little inside separation to be a bit more evident. And sometimes using a little bit of water on your brush. I just picked up black and brown. You could certainly you know, utilize whatever darkness you would like to just kind of get that to elevate, maybe a touch more back in through here just to make sure that this has enough shape on the back of this boot in through here. And then of course you can certainly keep tweaking this whatever way you want it to. If you wanted a little highlight on the tip of this the sole part, you could certainly just add a little bit of lightness over there on the left hand side to catch a bit of the light. Or maybe you have a little dirt, maybe it's all scuffed up on the edges, whatever. Maybe you have a pair of garden boots that you're trying to get these to emulate, so you can certainly tweak them as much as you want. And then we're going to use maybe all three of our brushes for the next step, so you can just get them ready. I'm going to wash and dry my medium brush. If I want to do any more little tweaking on my boots, I might go ahead and do that, but I'm going to get all of my brushes prepared for the next step, because you guys can probably guess what we're doing next. We're going to have some fun. All right, get ready. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're starting our flowers. We're going to be painting our purple flowers. I'm going to be resembling mine after lavender type flowers, but you could certainly consider yours to be lilacs or other little, there's lots of little purple flowers that these could be giving the impression of. So I want you to just have fun throughout this process. Don't feel like it needs to look like a photograph. We're just painting some pretty spring flowers. And I have decided I'm going to be using my large and my medium brush on this particular step. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to start with just purple paint on my large brush to start. I'm going to be having my purple flowers or lavender flowers or lilacs, whatever you'd like to call them, over on the top left of these two larger areas in through here. And then I'll have a couple of little bushels or little patches of them throughout my walkway. And then I'm going to be adorning my my distant archway with some of them too. So I'm starting with just purple, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to be doing polka dots in a sense, but I will be making them in the ones that are evident. If I want them to be almost very representational of lavenders, I'm going to have them tall and kind of slender with the structure of it, so it's almost a kind of a pointy type of a flower, but it's fluffy looking. So I'm going to go ahead and make myself quite a few of those. Then I'm going to come on in through here and make a few more of them. So I'm using the skinny part of my brush to create these little pockets of flowers. As I get towards the smaller ones, I'm really not concerned about it having tall, slender type look. I'm really just going to use the corner of my brush and put in a little area of purple flowers, and it can go over into your walkway a little bit if you'd like to. I'm going to go ahead, I think I'm going to have a little section of them over in through here, so maybe these are little purple tulips or something off in the distance. Let's see what else. I'm going to do more on this big left side. These are going to be the ones that are more in focus, so to speak, so I'm going to go ahead and utilize that corner of my brush just to get these more straight or pointy looking type formations. I'm going to go ahead and do some in through here as well. And I know I'm going to have them overlapping. We're going to do another step before we're done them to give them a little bit more dimension, but this at least starts it. I'm going to leave this bottom part available for my daisies that I'm painting later. So right now I still have purple on my brush. I'm also picking up white. So I have purple and white because I want to make my distant one back here, but I want it to be lighter. So I have purple and white on my brush, and I'm really just going to do some very faint little polka dots back here. I'm even going to bring a little bit onto the land in through there, and then go ahead and put some in through here. So if you have areas around the edges of your walkway that need a little finessing, go ahead and put that in through there. And then I'm putting down my large brush. I'm picking up my medium brush. This is going to give me more detail on the larger ones that I have. So I have purple and white on my brush, and I'm just going to kind of do almost like these little pointy marks with this brush that are going to give it a little bit more dimension. So I'm using purple and white, and this is just going to give me a bit more dimension on these ones that are, in my opinion, closer to us. So you can just tap it. I'm just doing almost like these little pointy polka dots to give it a little bit more more dimension, but I don't want it to go too white. So if yours goes too white, just bring back some of that purple, and this is just giving you a little bit more dimension to it. I'm going to go ahead and go over, just add a couple little white dots in through here just to give those some, and then this bigger one over on the right hand side, this too, I'm going to just kind of tap my brush going up and down those larger areas to give it a bit more dimension with the light and the dark purple that's going to allow it to have more substance to it, so it looks more like an identifiable flower, less like just a bunch of polka dots. This is giving us some kind of structure to it. And again, if you wanted to add any more detail to it, go right ahead and do so, but I'm keeping mine more on the simpler side, just so because we're going to have tons of flowers throughout the whole thing. So this is just giving me a nice color variety throughout the painting. And then I'm going to utilize my, I think I'm going to just use the medium brush for the next step. So once you're done with your purple flowers, you can wash and dry your medium brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting our roses. So I'm going to be using my medium brush. I'm going to be using red, white, and yellow and green also, because we're going to do little leaves around the edges of them too. So again, I'm not terribly concerned about these looking like photographs, but I do want it to be visibly representational of roses. So I'm going to have a closer rose patch or pot in through here, and maybe I'll do a little section of roses over here. And then as I go further away from this focal point, this front area, I'm really just going to be doing red polka dots for the ones that are off in the distance. So I'm going to show you how to do the ones close up. I'm going to start with just red paint on my brush, and I'm going to be just sporadically putting some red sections throughout this particular bushel of flowers. So I just have red paint on my brush. I'm doing some in like a circular type fashion, but in other areas I might just do a little polka dot type section. So don't worry terribly about making every single one of them circular. They can certainly go over the edge of the pot itself. That's going to make it look much more realistic. You can certainly have a couple behind your boot too, so just feel free to make them as big or as small as you want. And if you need to fill in any areas, just do little red polka dots. We're going to put some leaves in there in a minute as well. So that'll help to fill it in as well. But once you've got some good red areas in like that, what I'm going to do, you could wash your brush, but I'm not going to. I'm just picking up a touch of white paint on the end of my brush. And to make these look like rose petals, so to speak, I like to do almost like a spiral type brush stroke within the center of that flower. So I'm going to start somewhere in through here. And I'm going to just make this little spiral, and then I can just pull out the edge petals, something like that. So again, not doing much. I don't press hard. I have a little bit of white on the edge of my brush, and I'm doing this little spiral. And then I just kind of add these bits of little highlights where I feel that the other petal edges would be. So you might not necessarily see a lot of the center. Maybe you just kind of, maybe this one is to the side. Maybe this one I see a big center. Again, I'm just picking up white paint on the tip of my brush. If your brush isn't as pointy as mine, you could certainly use a smaller brush to do this. And if you run into wet red paint, which is exactly what I'm doing, and that is exactly my intent, the red paint along with the white is going to provide me with some good dimension throughout those petals. So if you're not getting a little gradual blend with yours, you certainly could pick up red and white at the same time. You could have little buds where you're just seeing the little skinny ones in through here. So maybe you just have a little narrow one, and then you just make as many as you want. The idea here is not to make it too systematic. These are, in my opinion, meant to look like wild kind of flowers, because they're not inside. Anything to me that's set outside is going to have a bit of the wild side of Mother Nature on it. So you can certainly have fun with that. And then once you have as many of the flowers that you want, I'm just going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to put some green, yellow, and white little leaves sticking out the sides, especially on this particular one, because I know that this one is nice and in focus, and I just want to make sure that I have enough life within this one. So I just am making sure that I fill in the gaps on this one. So you could certainly, if yours already looks filled enough, awesome. If not, you can certainly just add some additional little leaves coming off the sides. And then I'm going to repeat this same exercise for one that I have a little batch over in through here. So I'm just going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to put some red paint on it, and I'm going to go ahead. This is going to be a much smaller section. This is going to be below my my purple flowers, and maybe this one comes off the side a little bit in through here. I know I'm going to have a whole bunch of daisies in through here, so I don't even need to contend with that area. And then that's looking pretty good to me. So now I'm going to pick up my white paint, give myself these little spirals to give you the impression that those in fact are little roses throughout there. And again, you can see I'm really not doing anything too tricky here. I just want to give the viewer the impression or the illusion that these in fact are little rose bushes. And to tell that tale, they need to identify that flower, and what are the identifying marks of a rose, and it's those that tight little spiral in the center of it. So I just picked up my green, yellow, and white just to make sure that I have a couple of vibrant little leaves poking out in through here. And again, I don't need to do much. I just want to make sure that I have enough life and enough interesting pieces in through there. So that looks good. So now I'm just going to wash and dry my brush, and the rest of my roses are going to be polka dots. So I'm going to start with red. I'm going to have a little bushel over in through here. So I'm just going to kind of get them all in through here. And again, you can have as many as you want. I'm going to have some up in through here. And I'm just taking my brush and making some tiny little polka dots. I know I want some up in through here. I guess I could have had them along the trellis of my archway, but we'll leave the roses down in through here. And then of course, if you want some poking up there, now I'm just picking up a little bit of white to give them their little highlight of sorts. And again, nothing major, just little white polka dots within the red polka dots. And then we're going to use this same brush, the medium brush, for the next step. Maybe I'm going to say medium and small brush for the next step. So once you've got this all done, you can wash your medium brush and your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we're painting our daisies. I'm gonna use my medium and my small brush, and I'm gonna be using white and yellow paint. So I'm going to start with my medium brush to put my bigger daisies in place, and then I'll use my small brush to put my smaller daisies in place. So I'm having daisies all throughout here. I'm gonna have them all around this edge. I'm having them all lining up and down my pathway. I'm gonna have some in here. I'm gonna have some over here. I'm gonna have some down here. I really like my daisies. So I'm gonna have them everywhere. Daisies can come in any color of the rainbow, but I'm gonna choose to do mine white with a little yellow center. You can have fun making yours however you would like. So I think I'm gonna start over in this vicinity so you can see some bigger ones, and then we'll get to the smaller ones. So daisies can have all different sizes of petals. They can be long or short, but typically they're going to be relative to other flowers, I guess is what my thought process. But as they go around, they're going to be pretty symmetrical from one another. So I can have these in different directions, like maybe we're just going to see the side of this one, and maybe one of them we see totally straight on, so they're all equal of length. But if you want it to look like you're seeing it from the side, you can kind of make them almost like flopping over in this kind of direction. And you can have them on top of each other. You can just see the side of one coming out over the side. Once you've got them all in place, oh, I think I want one down in through here too. I like my daisies, and you can have them all on top of each other. Yeah, that's pretty. Maybe a little one over here too. Sorry, I could put a bunch of daisies on. I really like them, and you can, like I said, overlap them, have as much fun with them as you want. And before I move on, I'm just going to pick up a little bit of yellow and just dot the centers. If I see the center, maybe I don't even see the center on that one. And I'm just giving a loose interpretation. You could certainly make yours much more detailed than mine if you want to. You could, make them, again, overlap each other or with different colors or however you want to do it. And then if I'm going to do some smaller ones, I'm actually going to switch my brush to my smaller brush, and I'm going to do little tiny ones in through here. And of course, I'm doing the same kind of process that I'm doing multiple, almost like a little starburst of sorts, but because they're smaller, I'm not really going to be terribly concerned about being able to see all of the details on them. So at times I'm just going to be making some little polka dots to give you the impression that maybe we're just in a little field of the daisies. Maybe I've got a couple coming out over this side in through here. And again, once I've got as many on there as I want, they're great space fillers too. So if you have an area where you're like, oh, I really want some flowers, well, just put a whole bunch of little white polka dots and we'll call it little light white daisies. So I can put some in through here if I want to. And then once I've got enough that I feel have filled the space, I just pick up a tiny bit of yellow, and wherever I feel like you'd be able to detect the center of that daisy, I'm just going to pop a little tiny yellow dot. And I'm going to do the same thing. I think I'm going to move over to the right over here, use my medium brush to make my large ones over in through here. And I think I'm going to have some of these like crossing over my boot. I think that that's super cool to give the illusion that there is in fact more dimension to this painting. If you can have flowers overlapping things, that definitely helps make a larger impression on the dimensional element. Maybe this one's kind of coming over the side. I like to have bend to my petals too, so I tend to make them more on the curved side, so that way they look like they're almost flopping over and have some good movement to them. Maybe I've got one coming over in through here, and again, you don't have to see the every flower from dead on. You can certainly just, maybe I just see the edge of this one poking out from behind that flower, or maybe I've got one up in through here that's just kind of hiding. Maybe we're just seeing the edges of a couple of these in through here. So really have fun with it. Once you've got them as many as you want, just pick up a little bit of yellow paint and do, if you feel like you can see the center to any of them, you can just pop in that tiny bit of yellow. You could do more dimensional elements to it, but I'm just gonna keep it on the simple side, and then I'm switching to my smaller brush for the smaller ones. I'm gonna have a whole bunch kind of coming out and leaning into the edge of my pathway in through here. So this is gonna again just add a little bit more dimensions. These might almost look like little tiger lilies of sorts, or something kind of poking out the end in through here. So you can again imagine them to be whatever kind of flowers you want. I'm going to put a couple little ones in through here, and I'm just choosing to use the smaller brush because I can get smaller little petals throughout here, but you could certainly, if you were comfortable using that larger brush, you could certainly use that as well. And then I'm just going to kind of be a little more carefree in through here with them and just get as many on as I want. And then once I've got as many there, I'm just going to pick up a tiny bit of yellow paint and pop a little yellow dot in some of the centers. Of course, I might not see all of the centers, so that's totally fine. And then let's see, where else do I want some? I think I want just some little white areas up in through here. I'm gonna just kind of speckle my brush, maybe a couple little ones in through here. Wherever I have these green patches, put some little white flowers, maybe some in through here. And then wherever you feel like you want or need more, feel free to do so. We're actually going to be utilizing our medium brush for the next step. So once you have enough beautiful flowers in all of your pots and along the edges of your walkway, you can get your medium brush out and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we're painting our shadows on the ground. So I'm using my medium brush, and I'm gonna be using brown and black paint. You might find that depending on how light or dark your painting came out, that you might wanna use more brown or more black, or even when we get into the grassy areas, you might wanna use just green as your shadow color, because the shadow is just primarily meant to look like whatever the surface is, only darker. So if I was painting a shadow on this, I might just use brown. If I was painting a shadow over here, I might use a little black. So whatever that surface is, you want to just make it darker from the shadow. So I'm going to start over here underneath the boots, because that's probably going to be the largest shadow that I'm going to contend with. I'm using my medium brush. When I do this, I will probably have a touch of water on my brush as well, so I can keep that paint nice and fluid and moving while it's drying, so I can control how much I can see through it and exactly where it goes. So I'm going to start with a little black and a little brown on my brush and a little bit of water on my brush. I need to determine where my light source is, so it's here. and it is, my objects are here, so my shadow is going to be cast in this direction. So I have my boots in through here, so I want the bottom of my boot to be evident. This is going to be the back side of the boot. This is going to be the front side of the boot. And I might not even see the whole, it might just be a little part of the top that's casting a shadow. And then I'm just going to start kind of rubbing it into that area on the ground. And this shadow is going to hit into that, the little pot of sorts, which is great. And my brush has a little bit of water on it, so it is allowing me to continue moving this paint as it's drying, and I am dictating how thick and thin it is in certain areas. So that's going to be that one, and then this one is going to be probably just the little edge of the tip of the boot. So again, I'm just loading my brush with a little bit of water, brown and black paint. I'm going to have this one kind of coming in through here. I'm just kind of watching the edge of the boot and the direction of my light source and bringing this in through here. And it's going to just meet in with that one. So I'm just going to get this ground a little bit darker in through here. And again, depending on the placement of your sun, your shadow might be a little bit different than mine. It's all where that light source is and how it is casting a shadow. The light source is low in the sky, so these shadows would be pretty long in nature, so you can certainly fiddle with yours. I think I need to do something back here too, so I'm just going to add a little bit of darkness back here. Maybe this grass has cast a shadow upon the little walkway of sorts. That just looked like it was a spot that needed a little attending to. And then I just look around my canvas and see if there's anywhere else that needs shadows. So if my light's coming from here, I need a little bit of a shadow on the ground outside of these pots. So something just like that. And again, I don't need much, so I'm just really using the remnants on my brush to put a little bit of darkness in between these pots, and you might not even need all of them. Just watch where that light is coming from. Over on this side, I'll probably need it might be casting a little bit of a shadow of these onto the actual walkway itself. So I might pull this shadow out just a little bit more. I just put a little bit more water on my brush. So this might actually be casting a little bit of a shadow onto the actual ground itself in through there. So that, you know, you could have a little bit of flower pieces, just kind of adding a bit of shadow onto that walkway like that. I'm going to have a touch of a shadow along the bottom edge of these ones because they are on the opposite side of that light source. So this is going to, I'm using a bit more black on my brush right now just to get this to be a little bit darker. And you can, if you feel that you have taller plants or taller flowers, you can pull that shadow out into the little walkway a bit if you want to. And then I am going to make sure that I have this going all the way up this right hand or the top side of this walkway like that. And of course, again, if you want to pull any of them into the little path, you can certainly do that. And just make sure if you have anything up and through here that it's going to have that shadow on the opposite side of the sun. You can even in your little archway put a little shadow on the right side of some of those flowers. And then as I come down this side, it's going to still be on that right side. So I'm just putting a little bit in the grass, just making sure where, you know, maybe where you have a little bushel of flowers, maybe that shadow comes out a bit more into the grass. And I'm hardly doing anything. I hardly have any paint on my brush. This is just allowing me to give the illusion or impression of the sun and where it is casting its shadows upon, you know, what's happening with all of these little bushes of flowers that are happening in through here. So that's looking pretty good. Making sure that I've got it all over here. I've got this shadow. I'm thinking that that's pretty good. Maybe a little tiny fix up in through there. And then we are going to be using our large brush for the next step. So once you've got all of your shadows on the ground, you can put your medium brush away, take out your large brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting sunbeams coming from our sun. So I'm going to be using my large brush. I'm going to be using white paint and maybe a little bit of water too. But you do want to make sure that your canvas is dry before you start this step, because you're going to be doing streaks in front of the rest of your painting. So you'll want to make sure that all of your flowers and stuff are dry as well. So I'm going to start in the center of my sun, and I'm going to be just pulling out white, light little streaks. So I do recommend that especially if you haven't done this before, to water down a little bit of your white. So you can just take a touch of your white, put it on the side, and then pick up a touch of water with your brush and just kind of water it down just a little bit. It doesn't need to be super watery, just a little more fluid will make it a little safer. And then what I do is I will pat it on my paper towel. So that way it's a little moist and I will have the ability to pull it pretty far. When the paint has water in it, it will appear, especially white, it will appear to be lighter on the canvas. It will dry a little bit darker and more translucent. So just know that if it is, oh my God, really white when you start, if you have a touch of water in it, it will dry more on the translucent side. So all of my beams are going to come out of here. So I'm going to start right in the center, and I'm just going to kind of always be pulling that paint from the center area. And I can tell I hardly have any paint on my brush right now, so I'm reloading it. I want to make sure you can actually see it, and it doesn't have to come out exactly, you know, a half of an inch away from the last one. You can certainly make it come out at whatever degree that you want, but you want them all to kind of come out of the center of the sun, or wherever you want the center of the sun to be. So I'm going to pull as many out, and you can have them as far as you want. They can cross over your flowers, they can cross over your pathway, they can hit your boot a little bit if you want them to. Wherever you want that sunbeam to be, feel free to put it there. This is the morning sunshine. It can certainly cast its beautiful brightness upon a wide spectrum of area. So I'm just going to kind of keep adding these little beams until I feel that I have enough of them. And then once I feel that I've got enough of these beautiful beams coming out of my morning sunshine, I am going to prepare myself for the next step, which will be with my tiny brush. So once you've got, it's definitely looking like a spring morning to me. So once you've got this all nice and sunshiny, you can put your big brush away, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so we are on to the final step. This is the final step of every painting, which is to sign it. So I usually sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right corner. I'm using my small brush. I'm going to be using black paint. I'm going to sign mine in the bottom left. I'm using my initials, but you could certainly use your first name or the date or a symbol. Whatever you'd like to use is totally up to you. And that is going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you painted yourself a beautiful blossoming path, and I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.